What's up, guys? I am SaltEMike, and this is your Star Citizen Week in Review for August 16th, 2021. 3.14 is in the process of being fixed, but it's not fixed yet. Not even close. There's some positive changes coming to the roadmap for future gameplay enhancements at some point. And the Star Citizen devs, they don't hate PvP, they swear. All on today's Week in Review, so let's check it out. And as always, if this is your first week in review, this is where I take all of the official Star Citizen news, put it into one condensed video each week, and throw my opinions in there as well. Also, I live stream on twitch.tv/SaltEMike every day but Monday, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you want to talk about any of these subjects or stop by, say hello, have a conversation, that's the best place to do it. We got a lot to get through, so we're going to start out with some patch notes. This week, we had 2 PTU patches, nothing too live yet, starting out with the Y patch. Security should no longer try to arrest you when you have delivery boxes that are lawful, but yeah, that's a weird one. But assume that like most of this patch was just like crash fixes. Apparently it dealt with the ship claim bug, but we'll find out that probably wasn't the case, because on PTU-Z, this fixed a bug coming out of prison that you were invisible. There's all sorts of issues with this, but this was the worst issue coming out of prison, and we should be able to claim our ships now in the patch notes of this patch. But as far as the recording of this video, I don't believe these fixes are on live yet. There's also a lot of back-end stuff, crashes, optimizations, and all sorts of things like that. Now, moving on to roadmap updates, this is a big part of today's show, roadmap roundup. A team seems to have been broken up. The live mission content team appears to no longer exist, not because Star Citizen doesn't have content, but seemingly because they're trying to make some. The members of this team are being moved into the locations pipeline, and what the locations pipeline used to consist of was basically just art and level designers. So now it will consist of missions and AI work and gameplay and things to do. So this kind of breaks one small team up and adds the people that are needed into a larger, more important role. And yeah, that I think it'll just make the overall locations in the game feel more alive, have something to do where you don't just stop by for a few minutes and then leave. I think it's a really positive thing. And for me, this was pretty much everything in the roadmap roundup. A lot of the other stuff that we're going to talk about is a little bit more basic. So with that, they renamed some teams. So Landing Zone 1 content team was renamed to EU Landing Zone team. Montreal Modular was renamed to Montreal Sandbox 1. Modular is now named EU Sandbox 1, and there will also be an EU Sandbox 2 that we'll see on the roadmap soon. There's some new things added to the progress tracker. Targeting V2. This really seems like integrating targeting better with multi-crew ships. There's also some new ammunition, plasma. These are found on some of the Vandal ships. They basically cause damage over time. This is almost 100% a result of Squadron 42 priorities. Incendiary, it burns on impact, very similar in terms of a damage type to plasma. And disarray, it emits electromagnetic pulses to disrupt power. So these are all really interesting, but not that big of a deal right now because they're a little bit far down the line on the roadmap. Space mines, I still really can't see the vision for space mines because space is so big and the areas are so big in Star Citizen. I'm really curious about that. Save and load for Squadron 42. Okay. Aerodynamic control surfaces. This is the sim-like flight for ships in atmosphere. I'm a little nervous for this, to be frank. I'm already a bad pilot, so this is just going to make me worse. And a big note here is all of these are coming and are being added to the Q2 22 roadmap. These are super far away. Nothing is set in stone. Most likely, we will not even see these things. Roadmaps that are this far away in Star Citizen are almost not even worth paying attention to. There's also 3 ships: the Genesis Starliner, the RSI Orion, and the RSI Lynx. 2 of these 3 ships, the Starliner and the Orion, are some of my most anticipated ships ever for Star Citizen. First, again, they're on the roadmap really far away, Q222, and are unlikely to complete anywhere near that time. Second, I'm not convinced that these are going to come with coinciding gameplay that are required to make the releases of these ships epic. So I'm trying not to get too excited about them, even though these two ships are something I'm really excited about. If you look at some of the ships on the roadmap, it's really just their concept phase, because that's the only team that's working on them right now. And the reason for that is, I actually asked a few around, and Jake from the roadmap team confirmed it, is the ships are getting concept in Q2 2022, but Q3 and Q4 are not something they've added to the roadmap yet. So we don't even see the length of time it will take to make these ships. Now, moving on to things that are removed from the tracker, cutting V2. This was our multi-tool and eventual standalone tool for cutting things in the game. Charge drain tier 0. I assume this was the battery on like our multi-tool and things. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens with that. Ground vehicles V2. I can't remember what this is supposed to be exactly, but maybe it was supposed to make them relevant. I mean, the ROC is really the only vehicle that has a purpose at the moment. The Akiro cluster. This was an asteroid field in Pyro. The ground scramble races, man, these probably need to die at this point. They were fun, but racing clearly isn't a priority in this game, like in this decade. It's sad. Reputation gates for missions. You know this one will make me upset, guys. Hoping this makes it back on the roadmap as soon as possible. I just prefer reputation things and things to grind and things to do. That's just the way I like to enjoy games. And then counterfeiting data and download missions. Okay. We've never had them, so it doesn't know what it's like for them to be gone. Things that are returning. Dynamic population, likely to do with the update we talked about procedural characters last week. Ladders tier 1. Anything to fix ladders in this game is a good thing. And actor status tier 2. Good to see it back, but given it's more of the finer details like hygiene and cybernetic limbs and things like that, it's also super far away, so not a huge deal. They added to release view for 3.15 hospitals and clinics around Stanton. The newer landing zone hospitals at New Babbage and Orison will be in it, as well as some of the stations. Inventory and loot features, loot gen in crates and lockers and boxes with random loot, asset manager app that keeps track of that loot, and support for physical and local inventories. So these are kind of a big deal. We've heard a lot about them lately, but they are now on the roadmap for 3.15 tentatively. Infiltrate and defend missions. These are bunker missions getting reworked, I assume. Missions should range from what we already have to non-combat missions. Let's see what the mission team pulls off. I'm really interested about this one. These should go well with the loot gen stuff also that we just spoke about, so we'll have to see what happens with those. Location and AI. Bartender AI tech that has never really worked well is now making its way to coffee stands, pizza bars, kiosks, and more. Fantastic. We'll have to see what happens with that. We talked last week about the doctor and nurse behaviors as well in the hospitals being a thing, so that's in 3.15. Orison V2. This is actually a surprise because optimization is pretty bad there, so expanding it didn't seem as likely to be a thing for me, but looking forward to seeing more of what it brings. And, you know, we did see the Crusader showroom last week, which looks pretty cool. Later releases, 3.16, Area 18 Hospital. 3.17, Lorville Hospital. It probably is just more difficult to revamp the older places to have newer things. Removed from release view was ship interior OC streaming. That is a big thing that was planned for 3.15, and it basically, until it's not in, it doesn't seem like ships like the Idris or any other larger ships that players have purchased can be spawned by us in the game until this happens. So when this comes on, that means it might be possible. But if it's not there, I doubt it would be. So this is a disappointing thing to see come off the roadmap, but I also don't feel the game is optimized or ready for things like that. So it seems like it makes a lot more sense to prioritize something else, right? Now, moving on to video updates, we had an ISC and an SEL. We're really only going to touch on ISC, where they did a PvP featurette. We start out with how the devs view PvP in Star Citizen.
Some people want Star Citizen to be just a purely PvP game, and some people want it to be just a purely PvE game.
And what makes Star Citizen unique is that PvE and PvP are always blended together.
Because it's such an open world game, it adds a new layer of difficulty to your missions.
If your mission is go kill some AI and take some cargo, well, brilliant, that's the mission. But then the element of other players. Maybe you arrive there and they're doing the same mission. It's that element of not knowing, and it helps keep everything a bit more dynamic.
All right, it's obviously hard to disagree with a lot of this. I think that's why people bought the game and are interested in PvP. It's because of the freedom of choice that was available in the game. I mean, they're saying all the right things, right? But it's not that simple.
It is incredibly important that there are areas where you can more focus on PvE, where there's a bit of a safer space. That might be a system that is more heavily patrolled and policed, like Terra, in contrast to a system that is completely lawless, like Pyro, with Stanton kind of sitting somewhere in the middle of all of that. A high police presence, the law system kind of keeping players out of PvP can really create those areas where a player can focus on PvE to a much greater degree. For some of the more lucrative opportunities out there, you will probably have to go into a more dangerous area, and those dangerous areas are probably going to entail PvP as part of them.
And I think that's where we come to where we are today. PvE players clashing with PvP players in a system that probably shouldn't allow as much freedom to PvP as it does, but in turn doesn't funnel players to high-risk areas to create PvP. If you haven't tried Ninetales Lockdown, though, this is kind of their attempt to do so, and they explain it here.
So one example of that is in the Ninetales scenario. Players can accept the security contract and go to defend a particular objective, but what they don't know is that the enemy Ninetales can also hire players to prevent that, and that uncertainty just makes the scenario and what could happen in it so much more interesting for players.
I think the issue here, though, is that the game is extremely broken at the moment, and the economic incentives for PvP or for PvE players to do Ninetales just aren't working and really aren't there, so it's kind of disappointing. I would argue Ninetales is a bit of a mess at the moment, but only because of the state of the game, and they kind of make a statement about that.
Of course, the elephant in the room with player versus player content is always going to be frame rate and desyncs. But while the engineering teams that are responsible for handling issues around that are fighting the constant battle against those, we are not going to stop developing content to support that style of gameplay.
I think it's nice to hear them address the issues of desync, and it's nice to hear them address that, but I'm sure most PvP players feel like they're not addressing the actual issues because they haven't gotten better. They've only gotten worse. So hopefully there's a change to that soon, and the interaction between players can be a more enjoyable experience, even if it is a PvP one. They also touch briefly on Jumptown 2. Because design is just starting, the only real important thing that was mentioned is that there will be short bursts like Ninetales to not break the economy. But other than that, it sounds like the drug lab is going to be a hotspot for trade. The whole break the economy thing is hilarious. The economy's been broken forever. It's like a meme at this point. I can't believe they even mentioned that. But moving on, they also had an Arena Commander featurette where Fire Sprite has the reins. So what did they do?
We took on board the community wanting a much larger player space, pretty much making those maps like 10 times bigger. Navigation-wise, we're going to try to give the player some way to navigate so they know where they're going within the maps. So to provide that, we decided to look at the maps, dividing it into kind of 3 player spaces. So for example, Broken Moon, we've got an area that is a lot more packed full of asteroids. We've got an area that's a lot more open, and we've got an area that's got visuals that you can fly around.
Okay, cool. I'm curious to see how this plays out. From a visual perspective of knowing the area and callouts and stuff like that, this might make sense, but I have no clue how it's supposed to play out. I don't know how we're supposed to play Arena Commander within these zones. So, again, this was all visual, no designers talking about the game, the actual interactions with the game, only the places. But before we move on, they did the same thing with the Dying Star map, so take a look.
We've got a central station in the middle. You've got an area which is very much more of that dark kind of clustered space. You've got a section which is almost entirely submerged in a gas cloud. You've got kind of larger, much more imposing asteroids with kind of smaller chunks littered around for people to fly in and around.
I mean, it looks absolutely sick. I'm looking forward much more to how it's intended to play, though. So the guys on the show were level designers and artists, like we said. Hopefully we hear some design things in the future, but great job so far, guys. They look awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to hear about the design just because Arena Commander being 10 times bigger, regardless of how good it looks, wouldn't be a good game if it's the same Arena Commander we're playing now. Spawning way outside, trying to join a fight, it's actually messy right now, so I'm curious of what their plans are in the future. For Star Citizen Live, it was all about QA. They went over some misconceptions about QA and a few other things, but weirdly, it sounded more like a recruitment video for QA than anything else, so we're not going to touch too deeply on it, but link will be in the description for you guys to check it out. On to other updates. We had a lore post. It was about a down-on-his-luck cargo hauler, and it conveniently mentioned cargo drones for taking cargo to and from his ship. A few days later, CIG shared their intentions for player hangars. So I think this is kind of where the lore ties into explaining how the game might play, which is always a good thing. Spectrum post on what causes bugs to be in live, but not in the PTU was posted. This just gives some examples of why it can be hard for them, but doesn't really say a whole lot of the current situation in 3.14, unfortunately. We had a sneak preview of Cryastro stations. These are all meant to be really cheap, hands-on repair stations. There's a bunch of different companies that are going to do repair stations. Cryastro is like this weird hands-on one. I doubt it'll be hands-on at start, but Star Citizen always makes locations first, but never what we do with them in the end. So the view that it's looking almost gives a first-person perspective of what we might do, and I saw some of the Reddit comments about it, but the idea of this being a thing anytime soon seems extremely unlikely. And then we had a couple server meshing posts. How many players are going to be on a server with server meshing? They're not telling us. Basically, meshing is still a priority, but more importantly, senior programmers are talking to content dev teams about how to make their content work properly in the server meshed environments, which is really good. Is any meshing tech coming into the game now? Do we already have any? Yes is the answer, which is awesome, but it hasn't really changed our experience yet. Nothing they really want to share. Not until stuff is on the roadmap is Clive comfortable talking about what they're working on or when we might see it. So guys, that is that for this week's Week in Review. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, please leave a like and comment down below on anything that you want to discuss, anything we might have missed. Check out my live stream if you haven't yet, and if you want to go above and beyond, you can hit that join button and become a member of the channel. I'm probably going to change some pricing soon. I'm thinking about making it a little bit less. I don't know, but if you do want to go above and beyond, you have the option to do that as well. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye, everybody.